Now, this actually is a good thing. It can really help you to plan out your animation and say, this is the direction I want to turn in first, second, and third. Okay? Because if you look at this, for example, you'll see that the Z direction, you can see that the Y and X axes maintain their orientations, right? They move with the Z axis. Okay? So that can be really cool if you want to rotate the ball first and then rotate in another direction. See, all the axes maintain their orientations relative to each other very, very well this way. Okay, so I rotated the Z, I rotated the X. I can rotate the X here, and then I could rotate the Y again. But now see what happens? As soon as you rotate the Y, the Z and the X axes line up with each other once you go just 90 degrees. Okay, that's gimbal lock, because at this point, once you reach this point, rotating in the X direction or rotating in the Z direction will give you exactly the same result. Okay, and you really don't want that. You want to be able to do each direction separately from the other. Okay, so let me see if I can find where this is. I think if we choose this, we go to Control A. Let me just check something really quickly. All control. Here we go. Okay, so this is the rotate order. Do you see this here? When you select on the object that you're trying to control, hold on, let me move it over here so we can see the object. Okay, when you select the object you're trying to control, every object will have a certain rotation order programmed into it. Okay, and you can change it. You can change it based on the needs of the shot. Okay, now, normally if you're given a rig, like in a studio or something, you're really not going to be going in and changing the rotation order of things. Usually they've tried to figure all that out for you. But the whole idea of rotation order is that if you know in general what the usual direction of rotation will be for an object, then you can try and avoid gimbal lock as much as possible just by choosing the correct rotation order. Okay, so here what you see, it's on XYZ right now. And what that means, if we turn X, see, X works just fine. Okay, if we turn Z, Z works just fine. But it's that middle direction that causes gimbal lock. Okay, so what you want to do when you're faced with an object that maybe you're rigging it yourself, or maybe you're experiencing a lot of gimbal lock and you want to try and change that, look at their rotation order and just realize that whatever is in the middle, okay, so in this case the Y direction is in the middle, that's the one that you really don't want to rotate if you can help it. Okay, so now to give you an example, in the case of a wrist, of a human wrist, okay, you can rotate to the side like this, you can rotate up and down. Those are your major axes. Okay, the one axis that you don't do a lot of is kind of this side to side. Okay, I can do it, but not a lot, right? So that would be the axis that I would choose to be in the middle of my rotation order, because I probably won't be using it all that much. So it'll help me to avoid gimbal lock. Whereas the other two, say you know, the nodding was maybe the X direction and this twisting maybe was the Z direction, then this XYZ rotation order would make sense to use. Okay, Bart, is that answering your question partially?
Yeah, maybe, but is it the only way to avoid gimbal lock?
The only way to avoid gimbal lock is to basically avoid rotating these things so that the axes line up. Now, that's the only way to 100% avoid it. There are ways to work around it, though. Okay, and I can show you some of that. So if you get into gimbal lock, there are things that you can do to, you know, basically make it a better situation. So let's set some keys here. All right, so I'm going to set a key on that. Let's move it through space here. Okay, so and then let's do a rotation. So in this case, rotating in the x direction. So I'm giving it a few 100 degrees of rotation there, 970. That's too many. I don't need 970. Let's back it up. Just do 200 degrees. All right. So there's that. Now let's do this. Let's turn him. Now see what happens? If I want to try and rotate in the direction I was already going, I'm out of luck. If I'm using gimbal mode, okay, which is this. Now, using gimbal mode, again, can help you to avoid gimbal lock by actually letting you see when these two axes line up, and you can choose to avoid it that way. But if you're using a different manipulator, you're not going to see that. See, I'm in local mode now, which is usually, I think, what most people like to use is local mode. Now I can continue if I set a new keyframe here to rotate in that same direction I was going, but I'm using the outer ring now, or I could use the Y direction here, as it's depicted. But okay, so if this is my animation, now you can see what happens. See how it goes crazy in this little area here? It just goes crazy. Whereas here it rolled very nicely. So what this means, something got screwed up. And it's because you hit gimbal lock that it's starting to freak out. So what we